When Doom the Dark Ages launches, not long from now, it will of course deliver a roster full of plenty of new or redesigned monsters, each bringing their own unique challenges to the table, as you would expect any new game to do in the Doom series. At the same time, however, we can of course also expect the game to bring some classic demons back into the fray as well. That mix of new and returning monsters is what id Software has smartly stuck with in past Doom releases, and it very much seems like the developer will stick with that strategy with Doom the Dark Ages. Take, for instance, the Revenant, a classic monster and a Doom staple. First introduced as a prominent enemy in Doom 2, the classic demon has since then returned in similar capacity across a number of variety of different Doom titles, from Doom 3 to the 2016 soft reboot to Doom Eternal, and heck, even in Doom RPG. Doom 64, in fact, is the only major game in the series that hasn't brought the Revenant back as an enemy. Sure enough, then, id Software has confirmed that the iconic demon will be coming back in Doom the Dark Ages as well. But before we get back into the fight against the longtime foe of the Doomslayer, let's pause and take a look back at the Revenant's inception, the many different forms it has taken throughout the series, and how it could take the stage in the upcoming sci-fi medieval prequel. For starters, what even is the Revenant? Essentially walking human skeletons who wear armor over their torsos and have missile launchers mounted on their shoulders. Revenants have largely stuck to that design archetype ever since they first showed up in Doom 2. Doom 2 introduced the Revenant as one of the more common enemies that players would find themselves taking on in combat, and in future appearances, that's largely the role that the demon continued to play. Doom 3, of course, saw a version of the Revenant that was significantly more slowed down compared to other iterations. Doom 3 as a whole had a much more deliberate and low-key tone and gameplay style than any other game in the series. And in keeping with that, the Revenant 2 was more of a slower zombie-like creature. The demon could of course still deal enough damage with melee attacks, and present a threat with its shoulder-mounted rocket launchers at range, but id Software significantly slowed it down and made it more of an isolated threat whenever it showed up. When the franchise reinvented itself with Doom 2016 and became what we know it to be today, it did so with the Revenant very much front and center. The demon returned as one of the game's most visible and prominent enemies, and it was redesigned and tweaked to fit with the game's faster and more aggressive gameplay style and combat style. Doom 2016's Revenants were significantly faster, and combined their pace and agility with classic melee and ranged attacks. They were still very much grunt enemies, so to speak, but in numbers they could certainly pose a big threat. Meanwhile, the addition of jetpacks that allowed them to hover and fly around for brief periods added an extra layer or so of threat that made the Revenants more enjoyable to deal with. Now, from a lore perspective, Doom 2016 added some more texture to the demon. The game's versions of Revenants are former humans, more specifically UAC military personnel, who, through experimentation, cybernetic enhancements, and repeated exposure to the Lazarus Wave, have been twisted and mutated beyond recognition into demonic skeletal creatures. That is, of course, the visual design that Revenants have been associated with across their existence in the Doom series, and Doom 2016 definitely stuck with a largely classic look for that demon. The Revenant returned in Doom Eternal, to little surprise, and largely maintained its look from the 2016 title. Other than maybe being visibly less bloody than its messier design in Doom 2016, Eternal's version of the character didn't look too much different overall. There were some changes or tweaks to speak of in other areas, however. For instance, the lore continued to add interesting layers. Doom Eternal's Revenants were being created by former UAC personnel who were now loyal to the cause of the forces of Hell amidst their invasion of Earth, which by extension meant they came with some interesting upgrades. For instance, Eternal's Revenants came equipped with modified neural programming, sending constant waves to their brain that caused them to remain in an endlessly frenzied and aggressive state, where they felt no pain and became capable of extreme bloodlust of violence. Given Doom Eternal's aggressive, brutal, and intensely fast-paced moment-to-moment gameplay style, the tweaks to Revenants made a lot of sense here and made them a great foe to face off against for large chunks of the experience. And here we are now, with Doom's next big entry on the horizon, and the Revenant unsurprisingly set to make another appearance, though the iconic enemy is taking on quite a different form in the upcoming Doom the Dark Ages. Bethesda and id Software have heavily advertised the Dark Ages as the beginning of a medieval sci-fi arc for the Doom franchise, and the game's take on the Revenant is looking very much consistent with that aesthetic. Revenant's melee attacks, for instance, are going to have a different flavor to them in Doom the Dark Ages, because the demons will now be equipped with a sickle that they will use when they find themselves up close with the Doomslayer, or other threats of course. From a distance, meanwhile, they'll still use shoulder-mounted weapons as they always have, but rather than shooting missiles, they will shoot out skulls that players will have to avoid getting hit with. Similarly, instead of using jetpacks to hover, the Dark Ages version of the Revenant will simply levitate and fly around, in keeping with the game's new dark medieval aesthetic. That Revenants would return in Doom the Dark Ages roster of enemies was maybe not something that was ever in any real doubt for anyone, but it's certainly exciting to see the demon being changed and redesigned to fit with the series' prequel-era aesthetic. Doom the Dark Ages is touting a slower and more methodical gameplay style than that of Eternal, while still promising to retain the intense and aggressive moment-to-moment feel of its predecessors. So it should be interesting to see how the changes we're being made to the Revenant will allow it to fit into the larger experience. In the past, Revenants have been tweaked and changed to fit with the different styles of gameplay that the Doom series has espoused. From their original appearance in Doom 2, to their more zombie-like iteration in Doom 3, to their reinvention in Doom 2016, and the subsequent Eternal as the faster and more violent enemies that we all know them as now. Each of those past changes has been successful, so we're optimistic about how the new Revenant will help Doom the Dark Ages establish its own new medieval sci-fi gameplay style. So, what are your thoughts on this? Go ahead and share them in the comments below. And if you like this video, please subscribe to the channel and enable all notifications by clicking the bell icon to get new video updates. We upload every day and would really appreciate your support. Thanks for watching.